Hey everyone, my name is Matthew Friedel. I'm the filmmaker of The Missing Piece. I'm here with milesneale, friend, teacher, amazing protagonist of this story. And we're going to just talk a little bit about the, just kind of what's come up for us after this project is kind of reaching culmination and we're putting it out. So yeah, I don't know, it's been months now it's been years for you really since this whole project began. I just want to kind of touch base and see what insights have crystallized, what it's like looking back on this whole journey.
Yeah, I guess the first thing that I notice or growing to appreciate is just how multi-leveled things are. I mean, on the one, there's like the everyday level of us meeting and you being a filmmaker, me constructing a pilgrimage, going to a mandala, the Borobudur, its history, doing a ceremony there. All of these things exist on a kind of physical plane. There's a kind of a dimension there, sort of, we could call it an ordinary dimension, which has its own backstory and its causes and conditions. And then underneath it or within it or in association or in conjunction with it is this other a multiverse of symbols and archetypes and synchronicities and a depth of meaning that has brought us together and brought Geshe Tenzin Zopa and other students together and even people we're not even connected with. So there's just an uncanny synchronicity that happens. And I think for me, it speaks to how I see the world and how I've been seeing the world over the last few years. One foot incredibly embedded in the practical, the logistics, let's say, and another one that's looking at through the lens of the mythos and the archetypal lens and just being blown away, and I think we could just deconstruct that alone. Like the first time we met in Bali, you were coming in with your own story and your own journey and your own sort of visions and it's just no coincidence how we met like that and then what the Borobudur symbol really means for the larger landscape. I mean, that's what is so interesting and compelling and still, like, I have to pinch myself, unfathomable, the archetypes that arose and I don't want to, they deserve so much of our attention. They can be unpacked and I think you do a great job in the movie unpacking it and putting it in its multi-perspective context, but for me that's still an incredible, revelation really to be able to straddle these multiple dimensions of reality.
Mm-hmm. I think it was interesting because we both kind of came in a similar place in a way. I mean, I know maybe you give a little backstory in the first episode of what you were bringing to this, like where you had completely left everything behind. You had come to Bali, like maybe give people a short, just little peek at where the story started for you, because that wasn't really explored too much.
I mean, the short answer is that there were visions. I mean, and I say that with no longer feeling hesitant about it. I mean, because the more I have conversations with people around the time of the pandemic is a kind of portal. It's a kind of crossing over. Whether you were new to psychedelics or you were new to listening to your intuition or you were, exposed to some new spiritual pathway, people are having different kinds of interesting experiences. And I was no different. I started sort of feeling moved to Bali. And it didn't make sense rationally at the time. Like it was not a good time to move in the middle of the pandemic. But something inside of me really pushed for it. And by the time I got to Bali and by the time I met Chokade, the wizard of Bali, I was already having visions of the Borobudur and bringing a pilgrimage there and bringing Geshe Tenzin Zopa there, but he wasn't there alone. So I started having these visions of two masters coming together And it wasn't even another master of the Buddhist tradition, it was a Hindu tantric master. And that much was clear, and I didn't know what it meant, I didn't know what purpose it served, I didn't know, how I was gonna orchestrate it or put it together, but it became very impressionable. And again, with a lot of this, if I was earlier in my career, it wouldn't have made sense, and my reasonable, rational mind would have just dismissed it. But I was sort of open to these signs. I was following the breadcrumb trail. I had given up an enormous amount by leaving 25 years of my network in New York City and all of that I had built, basically wiping clean a mandala, and moved my family here and was open to the signs. So I was following them without really knowing what they meant. And I'm quite sure, maybe you can speak to this now too, what signs you were following.
Yeah, similar place. I mean, I was a complete mess when I came to I mean, I built a very what I thought right life. You get on a trajectory when you're young, and you think, for me, it was I want to go make films. I want to, I moved to Los Angeles as soon as I could. I grew up in the Midwest, and as soon as I could, I got to the West Coast and was chasing this dream. And I worked my way to a point of pretty successful career in documentary film. Was married, I had a young child, and then in between 2018 2019 everything just broke. It just fell apart, everything. And I came to Bali in this place of just complete, I was following my ex-partner. She came here and wanted to try to set up a new life here, so I was coming to kind of just be co-parenting with her, and I had no ties to Bali. I didn't know how long I would be here, and it was very intense. As you know, when you first come here, it's like this island works you, it breaks you down, it prepares you and purifies you. So that was just a process of that over a few years, and I think when I look back, I'm like, what this symbol and what this film means for me, it's like the chakras itself is a symbol, is the missing piece, is the broken piece, is everything that I felt there was something in me that was missing at that point. And it took a long time to kind of to find that, to trace the little breadcrumbs and synchronicities that led from the dissolution of my old life into coming back to Buddhism after many years, really finding this draw to go deeper in that tradition. And it all kind of culminated in, it's hard to describe just these synchronicities of like, I felt like I needed to reach out to you. And then one thing led to the other, and then conversation, and then we're up in Ubud, and it just spiraled into this beautiful unfolding. And and now looking back, there was a sense of just unfolding faith that was really beautiful to reflect on. And so then coming full circle with this project feels like a way to then share that archetype with others out there who may be in a similar place, who may have feeling their own lives disintegrating or needing to completely reinvent who they are after COVID, or who knows, whatever challenges are coming our way. So I don't know, what felt like in your life, what was the symbol of the chakra for you?
Yeah, again, I think it's multiple layers of it. I mean, first I look out, just like you, a father of 2 young kids, I think about the future, and I think about how broken our civilization is, and have concerns and about what kind of world they're inheriting. And I don't think there's a parent out there that doesn't share that. So there's like the larger sense of our culture and our civilization being broken, at least at this tail end of, sort of teetering on the edge. That's what it feels like, without being too dramatic. And I think you capture that. You capture it really well it's stunning imagery, and I think it's very relatable that we're all sort of feeling the larger landscape of our civilization, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be economics, whether it be political, whether it be energy, whether it be medicine and health and wellness, whether it be the environment. There's something incomplete, there's something broken, there's something really fragile, there's something very tentative, and we feel it. I mean, and it doesn't necessarily feel good. It feels, I mean, you and I have shared this ongoing conversation just very casually where thankfully we're two men that can be vulnerable with each other and talk about how it does feel anxiety provoking and at times really helpless. So I think there's that image of the missing chakra for me is a reflection of our global or collective experience right now. And then personally for me, I mean, I totally relate on the personal level too, that I had built a career, and by any metric, any standard metric, any observation of it, it would have been a successful career and a meaningful career. I mean, I'm a therapist, I work with people, I help people, I support people. But living in Manhattan in a cubicle or in an office in a cinder block civilization, as I call it, and just sort of feeling suffocated and having panic attacks and saying like this run is over. This 25-year run with my wife in Manhattan is over. And if I don't do something about it, I'm not going to make it. So in a way, if I look back and ask myself, was it a choice? I think you would share, it's like, do we really have choice in the matter? Did we have a choice? I think we would have drowned if we didn't make the move, So, and yet not diminishing the fact that it's bold to take the risk, and it does require you jumping over into the unknown. And there is that kind of heroic entering into the dark night voluntarily. I think that is another part of the message here. So there's the incompletion of the civilization, something in the environment is broken and something inside of us is also broken. So there's that mirror. And then what are you going to do about it? So I think the first phase to acknowledge is like, it takes a tremendous amount of conviction and courage to say, I'm either going to double down and hold on for dear life, or bury my head in the sand, or pretend, or numb, or I'm going to face it and I'm going to go for it. And I think so we're stringing together pearls here in our conversation, I sense, and like it's sort of stringing together a bead that kind of follows the thread or the narrative of your film. I think that would be the next one, is like sort of that choice point to go in and to go deeper.
Yeah. For me, that was as talked about in the series, I was really at this choice point, crossroads point, is the way I kind of describe it, and in the way I wanted to see the future. And as world events are looking increasingly dark, and I was feeling a sense of, when you feel really broken inside, you almost want to see the world break a little bit too, right? You want to see like, screw it, like let this all come down and let it all burn so it can be rebuilt, because that's the only way, And so for me, this was kind of like it was a practice, and this is the way I look at all art, and especially what I'm able to do now is it's a practice, it's a ritual, it's a ceremony itself for me to answer certain questions or learn certain lessons or integrate teachings that this is the only way I know how, or this is the gifts I've been given in order to do that best. So for me, I was at this point where I came to a similar point in Bali when I first moved here, where I didn't know if I was going to be living much longer. I wasn't taking my own life, but I just had premonitions of death. I felt like I was very close. And then I was presented very clearly with a choice point. I felt intuitively at Bali of being like, you good? You want to keep doing this? So, you don't have to. And I made a choice then. And then I felt like I came to another choice around the time of this pilgrimage, which is, okay, that's where you are now. What future do you want to be in? And do you want to be in this pessimistic place? Do you want to be in this place of despair, or even resigning myself? I'm like, oh, I can look at the signs, I can read the astrology, I can do all these things that point to these things, and that makes me feel good about myself because I don't have to make a choice. I can say this is just all how it is, and I can accept that. And to me, that's a process. Like, that was a necessary process I had to move through in order to then fully accept the choice to be in an optimism, to be in a no matter what, an equanimity with, yes, I can prepare for a future, and I can accept that. Whatever happens, if we go down the dark path, I know I can accept that. I can step into that, what that requires of me. But I don't have to call that in. It's like I can still envision the more optimal, beautiful future that is also possible. Yeah. So to me, that place of looking at it is the same way we should contemplate death, is we should contemplate it so that we're not averse to it, and we can see, okay, that's a necessary step that I will eventually take, but there's still some agency in when that's going to happen and how that's going to happen. And I do believe that the mind is directing us towards certain futures. So to me, this whole process was like a learning of that, and an integration of what the future looks like for me. So yeah, I feel beautifully optimistic now in a way that even a year ago, right before the pilgrimage, was very, very different. So.
Yeah, I want to speak to that because I think that's where Salve Coagula fits there. Salve Coagula, this Latin phraseology that comes out of the sort of alchemical tradition, salve being dissolve and coagula being remade or recast or coming back together anew, is an archetypal theme that I used as the framework for my new book, the Return with the Elixir. And I think, listening to you, the reason why I want to interject here with this is because I think on the one hand, there can be a tendency to become hopeless and despairing. On the other hand, there can be an over-idealized sort of grandiosity that everything is okay, and it's sort of almost a bypass. Like I can just sort of adopt rose-colored bifocals to kind of just slap on our contemporary context or our civilizational transition. And I think Salve Coagula is important because it helps us with this choice point precisely because it says, yes, you do have to let go, and yes, there is grief, and yes, there is loss. It honors that. But it also tells us it's not the end, it's a doorway. And in my book, I fused together Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, and the Tibetan Tantras, and I show how each of them, in a way, is saying the same thing, is acknowledging this process that if you want to transition, you have to make a sacrifice. And the best way to make that sacrifice is to orient yourself towards loss and opening voluntarily. Go through the rite of passage. It's not an end. It may feel like it will destroy you and you will lose something, but you will gain something on the other side of it. And Jung was saying the same thing about entering into the process of individuation, that some part of you will also have to be jettisoned and you will get uncomfortable and you will go to the edge of madness, and there you will also find something you would have never found about yourself that you need for the onward journey. And the Tibetan approach to living and dying and rebirth is saying something also with the Bardo teachings and the methodology for rebirth. We do have to die. There is a dissolution. You have to let go of one life. You have to mourn one life. You may lose family members. You will lose everything that you've put together and accumulated. But you will be left with your mind, and your mind continues. And what kind of attitude that you bring will determine the new world that you create. And so it's two sides of the same coin, dissolving and rebuilding, dissolving and rebuilding, dissolving, rebuilding. And we don't have that message in conventional reality. We don't have that one that says embrace the dissolving and put your best foot forward in the rebuilding. And that's exactly what we needed, what each of us needed to reinforce in our private, personal lives. And it seems to be the broadcasting message of the missing piece.
I also think there's a big lesson around trust that came up. I mean, because let's be honest, like this process was happening whether or not we came and you put the pieces together. Like I don't think that us being here was exactly the causes and conditions of everything that's going on with the Chatra now. Like this is a long-term process and it's starting to come out. This symbol is emerging and I don't know, I still just like am in disbelief that like I got to even go along and do any of this, or the things we just went up to the Sun Valley in Nepal. I'm just like, how am I, invited into this, and it still feels like such a gift to be able to bear witness to this stuff, to show the people that are actually the ones behind the scenes doing this work. And I think in this film, in this series, that really allowed me that there are people at work, there are forces at work that are unseen to us. There are spiritual masters out there that quiet you and know exist, like Mankujito. Yeah. He's doing this work. And that's not to say that it doesn't, it's not up to each one of us to also do that. We can't just, I hope the message is that don't worry, these guys got this. They're going to reactivate the Borobudur and then everything's fixed. It's not that simple, But it was such an inspiration to me personally to know that there's so much force on the side of good that's at work out there, that's invisible, that people don't know. And I hope people can see that from this and they can feel inspired and then can use that inspiration to be that person in their life for the people that they can touch. So to me, that was kind of the thing I want to leave people with and to be inspired. Does that bring up anything for you in terms of just...
Certainly, because I think, what you're describing is that there's multiple thematics or multiple symbols within the script, within the narrative. And one of them is unity and diversity. The Shiva-Buddha coming together. So you have Mankujito, who represents the Shiva Tantra tradition. You have Geshe Tenzin Zopa representing the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition. At one point, these traditions were both combined. Then through 5 centuries of cultural forces, they were split and went dormant. And there's several predictions about them coming together at a time of apocalyptic crisis, and here we are. It is participating in magic, and it's participating in mythology, and it's participating in prophecy. We have the fortune to do that because we were turning ourselves over to the mythological perspective. We weren't ignoring the signs. We were following the synchronicities, and that's why we're in that. We were privy to this. But I think you're pointing to this. Another key message about this is that we couldn't just defer to the lineage masters, and not even the lineage masters could do it alone. Like Geshe Tenzin Zopa and Mankujito said explicitly, as you documented in the film, they need each other. And then what you're saying is, yes, I mean, it's not just Mankujito, there are the hidden realms of celestial beings and other kinds of agencies that are also supporting this kind of regeneration. They want it to work. So despite one bandwidth of reality feeling like the forces of darkness are descending upon us, there's also this hidden kind of sense that no, the light will prevail. You have to have faith and confidence and trust. You have to trust another part of your being that isn't keyed into the physical reality but knows that there's something else going on. Geshe Tenzin Zopa and Mankujito lived that life. They still needed each other. And then what I think what you're saying here is that they also need us to participate. This is not, there's no Obama to do it. There's no, JFK to do it. There's no Bono to do it. There's no Dalai Lama to do it. it's it being the regeneration of culture and regeneration of our civilization. It's not a heroic effort by one person alone. And I think it's worth spelling out the transition from feeling ordinary and helpless to everyone feeling like they can make a contribution is what we're talking about when we're talking about a chatra. We're talking about each and every one of us who feels broken and feels like we're not good parents, or we're wounded people, or, we just don't have what it takes, essentially. And that childish part of us that wants to outsource it to a bigger cat or bigger fish, it's just not, this transition is about us, is about ordinary people coming together, the masses, feeling empowered, and not with some grandiose 1960s kind of vision that, we can change the world, although that is in the film. It's true, but the world is also a consensus reality. So it takes everyone. It's going to take everyone to change it. Yes, we have to start with our own minds and crawl out of the deficiency mentality and the scarcity mentality. We have to feel empowered. That's why great masters are important. But then it's going to take everyone coming into that sense so that the consensus reality can transition. And so I think that's a really vital message.
Yeah. And the thing that's coming up for me is just the potency of art in these times. And that's something that's, I got thinking, how people, for me, there's no better way to integrate a message than to create art. Now, for you, I'm sure it's similar in teaching, and you see this a lot with people like, I just learned this great new skill. I've got this technique. I went through this training. And now I want to teach it. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's easy to see that's just coming from a place of ego. But if I look at that in a more generous, compassionate light, I also wonder if it's coming from this place of the best way to integrate something and learn and embody something yourself is through teaching it to someone else. Mm-hmm. And I feel it's a similar way with art, and maybe this is a better way of making, not everyone should become a teacher because you could lead people astray if you're not doing it right, but everyone can create art in some way, even if it's just painting, even if it's just making music. And I feel like there's this thing I'm really interested in exploring now, and I've this is kind of an example of what it looked like for me, was taking these big questions, these big spiritual, huge implications, and okay, how do I bring that down to this something that I can actually speak to, that I can actually create, that I can share? And it forces it through this funnel that requires a level of embodiment and understanding before then you can be able to create. So I felt like that's something that, it's not really talked about in the film, but to me, that's an inspiring way, especially as art is completely changing now with AI, and tools are coming to make, completely change the game in terms of what's possible if you don't have to have the same level of skills or connections or money to do these things anymore. So I feel like that's an opening for people to think about, how can I take my spiritual life and my spiritual path and these things I'm trying to learn and integrate, and then also express my desire to be creative and expressive and make things and create and bring those things together. So for me, that was a big learning here, was that's powerful, that's potent.
I have to say, and you're too humble to say it about yourself, so I'm going to say it as an observer of you. Like when I first met you, compared to where you ended up with the film, we had many conversations about how you wanted to portray what was going on, and there's some part of me that asked again and again, like, why can't you be part of it? Why can't you be more part of it, more explicitly part of it? And you were reluctant, and I think something inside of you grew, and it was really important for me because I think you're an incredible craftsman, number one. I mean, you have a very unique lens and you have a very unique skill set, and it comes across in your prior work and it comes across in this work, but there was something new here, I believe, and I would like you to just speak to it a little about your willingness to interject and fully own your own perspective, and particularly your own voice as the narrator in this film, that I feel grew as the film progressed.
Yeah, well, I had no idea. I mean, you basically just invited me to come along to Mount Lawu before the pilgrimage, and we're like, we're gonna bring these masters together. Let's see what happens. Something cool is gonna happen. Why not? Bring your camera. That was literally all I had. I didn't know anything about the Chatra. None of us knew about the Chatra. Even Mankujito and Geshe-la did not know that they had this share. That's maybe not emphasized enough in the film, that literally no one knew why we were coming together. We were just like, this seems like a cool opportunity. Why not? So I'm just filming being like, I don't know what I'm getting. This seems interesting. And that continued through obviously it crystallized to kind of in certain moments there. We're like, oh, okay, it kind of started to dawn on us what this was going to be about. But then I didn't know how I was even going to tell that story. There was no preparation. And, in my past in filmmaking, I'm very clear I want to have a preparation. I need to almost plan everything out in my head. So it was a completely new thing. I really just try to capture the best I can. And I my weaknesses as a camera person and all that are very clear on display, because I'm just trying to keep up. And so then I get back with all this footage at the end to the editing. I'm like, I don't know how to put this together. I was literally by myself. No one else has helped with this project. It was incredibly personal, but it was also practical, because I was like, I can't afford to do a full production, bring in camera people to shoot it, have professional sound guys there so that my mic isn't breaking and stuff like that. But somehow I was able to get stuff, and then I do have my experience. I have more experience in editing, so I knew I was comfortable there that I could craft it. I could mold this into something, and and then I realized, there needs to be there's not a focus of the story, an entry point for the viewer who's coming to this fresh. I think you're very, very good at eloquently speaking to a lot of these big issues, but it felt like there needed to be a person coming into it, and I realized, oh gosh, this has to be me. I have to be the person that's the story, and I hate being on camera. Even doing this, it's I'm happy to use my voice, and that was even a step for me at times. Is okay, bring my voice in. I don't have an interest in being a personality or any of that stuff. I'm just happy to be behind the camera. So it was an edge. It was an edge, and it pushed me. And I think it pushed me to an interesting place, because I realized it needed that. It didn't want to just be a purely documentary fly on the wall type of capturing, and nor could it. It could have been, I guess, if I had a crew and I did it properly. But even then, it felt like that was there needed to be a personal angle from someone. And I wasn't able to capture that, because I didn't know that's what I was looking for. I didn't have a character to be that in the story. So that I had to become that. So in some ways, that was something that the project itself called forth. And I still feel uncomfortable. I don't want to feel like it's my story or any sort of grandiosity around my role in any of this. But that slowly developed over time. And now, I'm just kind of following that to see where it goes. And this whole channel and everything is just an outgrowth of that, to continue that journey for as much as me as anyone else. But I hope that other people can benefit.
And I think that's the embodiment of this thing of going to your edge and finding something new discovering something new that you didn't know was there and would have never discovered had you not fallen on the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, that moment of who's going to do this? I guess I have to step in and do it. Yeah. Despite all your reluctance, hesitation, unwillingness, or whatever, fear, doubt, confusion. I think that's what this film is about. It's about you stepping over the edge and taking your skills and making an offering of it. And, I also think that your point of view is just one point of view amongst any, but it ends up being, I think, a very helpful one because you adopt a kind of skeptical stance. You have Geshe-la, who's deep in a tradition. You have Monku Jitu, deep in a tradition. You have my talking chatterbox about it, and then you have the skeptic point of view, which I think represents well maybe a whole segment of people that might come into, this is what Geshe Tenzin Zopa calls the free thinkers. Maybe they're not Dharma bums, maybe they're not Buddhist people, maybe they're not even into archetypal symbolism or whatever. They just catch a glimpse of this and they hear your narration and they feel just like you do in your narration of the film. Is like, okay, guys, but I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid here. Let's take a look at it slowly and dissect it a little more. And I think that's fair enough. It was, I think, a very important way to come across what maybe Geshe Tenzin Zopa would call upaya. It's skillful. I think you probably touched people more than if it was just a Geshe Tenzin Zopa revealing and teaching from a Dharma platform.
I hope people can feel by the end that it was important to people to realize they're participants in this. This is not a viewership.
That's true too, yeah.
You are coming into a mandala by just watching this and following this story. And I hope people can appreciate what that means and what that's a lot. That's something. And if you can, I hope people can hold the intention of watching this and viewing it as everyone has a little bit of psychic energy or intention or whatever you want to call it, that they're contributing to this, to what this symbol represents, which is peace.
Yeah.
And just by putting your focus on that, I think that's a lot, and that's a contribution that anyone can make. So that's what I hope people got away from, by the end and actually viewing the ceremony itself, that it doesn't matter that you weren't there in the physical body. It's the intention and the imagination. So one thing I want to ask you, then we could wrap up, but the last thing was the Shiva-Buddha archetype is not something we talked about a lot. And we were talking about this may be something we want to explore a little further, and there's more stories to tell with this. So stay tuned for that. We're going to see if maybe Bali guides us on more of a journey to explore this further. But I wanted to just see what that archetype meant for you, especially right now in this time, and if there's anything people could take away from that, because it's not really, we don't have time to explore it deeply in the story, but maybe you could add a little more context now.
Yeah, first of all, I do want to say, your explicit invitation to allow people to sit on the Borobudur stupa with us was, an amazing gesture, because I think as long as the film is out there in the world, it's trans-temporal, and it's a trans-temporal invitation. You as soon as you can see it, you're invited into that vibration. That vibration wasn't just time and place. It wasn't just 20, 30 of us at that time. I think it's a portal that's always open, and it's an amazing thing that you made an explicit invitation for the viewer. And think about it. I mean, more people that see it and more people that take advantage of it, the more that energy is developed. And that's really amazing that you did that. I think that it moves me just thinking about it. The Shiva-Buddha, I didn't quite understand it, and it's only now formulating a certain way, and I think it will develop. It's a big archetype about integration, about what Jung talked about the mandala as being a symbol of integration, where complex and dichotomous sides could be brought together. And so if you just look at Geshe Tenzin Zopa and Monku Jitu as human beings, as personalities, these are very, different people, different energies. And as depicted and as they said in the film, two masters, two different energies, two different traditions coming together. And then Geshe Tenzin Zopa said, that's how sparks are created. And their solve coagula, again, right there. It's like melt them down in the crucible and then let the fires, the fires of regeneration spark. So for me, I've had a great number of conversations with different people, and it's depicted in my book about what the Shiva and the Buddha really mean. They're king and queen coming together. They're the rational brain of the last 400 years, for example, scientific rationalism, which brought us so many advances, and at the same time also, created the causes and conditions for a soulless society, basically. And so you have the king of reason there that's ruling alone and in a way plundering the earth. And the call is for Shiva-Buddha. So what's the complement? Well, the complement is to call back the queen of intuition so that they can rule together. And so it's a symbol. It's a symbol for, the power of each of these archetypes, but independent, they have a shadow. And when you can bring different forces together, they can watch each other's shadow. They can be integrated in a way so that the shadow doesn't dominate or seep out. They're counterbalancing. And so one of them is, for example, the collectivist versus the individual. And we see this in society playing out. Our political division is based on, championing the self versus championing the collective. Well, if people don't start to see the shadow of their championing their cause, i.e. people who are individualists don't see the need for a communal sensibility, or people that are all for the greater of the good but don't see individual rights, there's always going to be a limitation or an impasse. So whether it's masculine and feminine, whether it's reason and intuition, whether it's collective sensibility versus the individual, or the individual rights versus the collective, or whether it's multiple religions, or whether it's science and religion, you start to see that this archetype is everywhere. And if we don't find a crucible or a mandala where they can intersect, have conversation, and create harmony, then we're always going to be prey to our own limitation. So I think that's what the Shiva-Buddha is calling in right now, is to ask each of us to, yes, champion our individual space, our personal beliefs, our values, our traditions, our ancestry, but then always keep it open and find partnership. So that's where it is right now.
Beautiful. I feel like that's a good place to end on, and having this I just want to have an informal chat, and it felt like giving a little bit of insight into maybe what's personally this is meant for both of us. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And thank you for all of you for watching. And stay tuned. We've got more to come.
Lots more to come. This is only the beginning.